They say this is where the road to nowhere ends. I say it's where the dead come for a cup of coffee. Welcome to the Mourning Diner, tucked away in a fold of the Appalachian Mountains so deep, the modern world forgets to visit. My name is Ellis Crane, and I came here to disappear, to outrun my past. Instead, I found myself living by 3 strange rules just to survive the present. What's the creepiest roadside attraction you've ever seen? Tell me in the comments below, and if you're brave enough to pull up a stool, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because at the Mourning Diner, the customers never truly leave. The graveyard shift begins now. I came to the Mourning Diner to bury my past. But it turns out this place only serves the dead. It's a forgotten greasy spoon tucked into a dark, suffocating fold of the Appalachian Mountains. A place where the static on the old countertop radio sounds too much like whispers, and the bitter, burnt coffee always tastes faintly of grave dirt and regret. My only co-worker, a girl named Maeve with haunted ancient eyes, handed me a sawed-off shotgun loaded with rock salt shells and 3 rules to survive the graveyard shift. Keep a loaded shotgun with rock salt shells behind the counter. Regular shotguns. Regular bullets don't work on mountain haints. If the jukebox plays country roads backwards, all the mountain spirits are coming home. Lock the doors immediately. When the Pope-like monster enters and demands you choose between hanging, burning, or being torn apart by trains, you must choose all 3 simultaneously. The last guy who worked my shift, a fella named Ricky, they said he just up and quit in the middle of the night. But earlier, I found his name tag face down in a pool of something dark and sticky behind the jukebox, right after it played a mournful old ballad I didn't recognize, a song that sounded a lot like a final choked out goodbye. My name is Ellis Crane, and penance is a funny thing. For 3 years in a state penitentiary, it was concrete walls and the echoing clang of steel doors. Now, it's the smell of stale grease, the low buzzing hum of a flickering neon sign that reads Mourning Diner, and a loneliness so profound it feels like a physical weight on my chest. I took this job because the ad paid cash, no questions asked, and this forgotten stretch of winding mountain road was as far from my old life as I could get. I just needed to earn enough to get my truck running and disappear for good. I didn't count on the job having its own kind of prison bars, its own kind of life sentence. Maeve moved around the small diner with a practiced, weary grace that belied her years. She couldn't have been more than her late 20s, but her eyes held the exhaustion of a senior citizen. She showed me how to work the ancient grill, how to coax the wheezing coffee machine into producing its sludgy brew, and how to handle the shotgun. "You probably won't need it," she'd said, her voice a low, smoky murmur. "But if you do, you'll need it bad. Aim for the center mass. Haints aren't solid, see? They're more like bruises on the air. Memories with bad intentions. The salt just dissolves them, reminds them they're supposed to be gone." I grunted, hefting the shotgun. It felt solid, real, a comforting counterpoint to the surreal, almost dreamlike quality of the diner. The red vinyl booths were cracked and faded, the chrome trim pitted and dull. An old-fashioned jukebox stood in the corner like a silent, colorful tombstone. Outside the large plate glass windows, the forest was a solid wall of impenetrable black, the trees pressing in as if trying to reclaim the small patch of light where the diner stood. The first customers arrived just after 2 a.m. They didn't drive up. They simply appeared. One moment, the stools at the counter were empty. The next, 3 figures were sitting there, hunched over, their forms indistinct and wavering at the edges, like a bad TV signal. They were silent, their clothes from another era. One man in dusty overalls, a woman in a simple 1940s house dress, another man in a tattered rail worker's uniform. A shiver, cold and sharp, traced its way down my spine. "The Haints," Maeve murmured, not looking at them directly. She was busy wiping down an already spotless counter. "They're the easy ones. They're just lost. Confused. They don't know they're dead. Don't talk to them. Don't try to take an order. Just let them sit. They'll remember where they're supposed to be eventually. I watched, my hand hovering near the shotgun I'd stashed behind the counter. The air grew cold where they sat, a damp, cellar-like chill that made my breath mist. The rail worker slowly lifted his head. His face was a pale, sorrowful smudge. His features indistinct, but his gaze was surprisingly intense. He looked past me, his eyes fixing on May. His mouth opened, and though no sound came out, I could clearly read the single word he formed with his pale, transparent lips. Liar. Then, like smoke caught in a breeze, he and the other two figures dissolved, fading back into the quiet hum of the diner. The profound cold receded with them. I looked at Maeve. She hadn't moved, her back still to where the Haints had been, but I saw her knuckles, where she gripped the cleaning rag, were white. The first week was a masterclass in denial. I learned the diner's rhythms, the groans of the old building, the way the shadows in the corners seemed to shift and writhe when I wasn't looking directly at them. The Haints came and went, silent, sorrowful specters who seemed more tragic than terrifying. I learned to ignore them, to focus on the mundane, mopping the floors, refilling the salt shakers, trying to scrub away the faint, coppery smell that sometimes seemed to rise from the drains. It was a job, a weird, unsettling job, but a job. I was convincing myself I could handle it, but the questions, like weeds, kept pushing up through the cracks in my carefully constructed reality. One slow night, while cleaning out a cluttered supply closet, my fingers brushed against a loose floorboard. Prying it up, I found a small, dusty cavity beneath. Inside was a shoebox. It was filled with old, curled photographs, dozens of them. They all showed Maeve, standing in front of the diner, her arm around a smiling coworker. But the coworker was different in every photo. A young man with a hopeful grin, an older, tired-looking woman, a fresh-faced teenage boy. They all wore the same Mourning Diner uniform. And in every single photo, May's smile was exactly the same, a practiced, brittle thing that never, ever reached her haunted eyes. Tucked at the bottom of the box was a small, tarnished silver locket. I was staring at the locket when the jukebox in the corner, which had been playing a steady stream of mournful classic country, clicked off. The sudden silence was deafening, a vacuum that pulled at my eardrums. Maeve, who had been prepping ingredients for the non-existent breakfast rush, froze, a knife hovering over an onion. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a terror so pure and absolute it made the hair on my arms stand on end. "No," she whispered, her voice a choked, strangled sound. "Not tonight. Please, not tonight." The silence stretched, taut and agonizing. Then, a loud mechanical clunk came from the jukebox. The turntable began to spin, but I could see from the angle of the tone arm that it was spinning the wrong way. The needle dropped onto the vinyl with a horrific, scratching screech, and the familiar, gentle opening chords of John Denver's Country Roads began to play. Backwards, it was a hideous demonic parody of the beloved song. The melody was a discordant, screeching dirge, and the lyrics, when they began, were a guttural demonic chant. The words twisted into something ancient and foul. It was the sound of a home not longed for, but of a home that was a trap, a gaping maw. "The doors!" Maeve shrieked. Her practiced calm shattered into a million pieces. She threw the knife down and scrambled for the main entrance, her movements frantic. "Ellis, lock the damn doors! Now!" Her terror was contagious. I bolted from the supply closet, my heart hammering. I slammed the heavy deadbolt on the back door just as she fumbled with the locks on the front. Outside, the world had changed. The quiet, dark forest was no longer just trees. It was moving. Dozens, Then hundreds of pairs of eyes, like hot, glowing embers, ignited in the darkness. Shadowy figures, taller than men, some stooped and animalistic, others unnaturally gaunt and thin, began to emerge from between the trees. They were the mountain spirits, the things the Haints were afraid of. They converged on the diner, a silent, inexorable tide of primal darkness. Their hands, long and skeletal, pressed against the plate glass windows. No sound came from them, but I could feel their collective will, a psychic pressure pushing, demanding to be let in. They weren't just spirits. They were a hunger. And the backwards song was their dinner bell. In the midst of the chaos, my eyes were drawn to the jukebox. Standing beside it, her form flickering and translucent, was the ghostly figure of a young woman in a faded 1950s waitress uniform. It was Nora Bell, a Haint I'd seen a few times, always quiet, always sad. But now her face was a mask of desperate, urgent sorrow. Her transparent hand was stretched out, her finger pointing frantically at the selection button for a different song, a different record. She hadn't been playing the backwards song. She had been trying to warn us. The mountain spirits pressed against the glass for what felt like an eternity, their silent, hungry eyes promising a multitude of terrible fates. The backwards song played on, a screeching, looping soundtrack to our siege. Then, as the first faint hint of dawn began to bruise the eastern sky, the song ground to a halt. The spirits outside recoiled, as if struck, fading back into the forest like smoke, dissipating in the morning mist. The oppressive pressure vanished, leaving behind only the diner's usual, suffocating quiet. Maeve collapsed into one of the vinyl booths, her body trembling, her face pale and slick with sweat. I stood panting, the rock salt shotgun clutched in my hands, its weight a useless comfort against the memory of those eyes. "What the hell was that, Maeve?" I demanded, my voice raw. "A bad night," she managed, her voice shaky. She wouldn't meet my gaze. "It happens sometimes. The wiring in the jukebox gets crossed. It plays the wrong thing." The lie was so pathetic, so transparent, it was insulting. Before I could press her, the crunch of tires on the gravel outside announced a new arrival. A beat-up county sheriff's patrol car pulled up, and a man in his 50s with a weary, weathered face and a sheriff's star pinned to his uniform got out. "Morning, Maeve," he said, pushing through the unlocked door. His eyes scanned the diner, lingering for a moment on my face, on the shotgun in my hands. "Everything all right?" Had a report of some strange electrical interference from this direction. "Everything's fine, Sheriff Griggs," Maeve said, her composure returning with startling speed. "Just a power surge. Blew a few fuses." Sheriff Griggs grunted, his gaze sharp and intelligent. He looked at me. "You're the new fella, Ellis Crane." It wasn't a question, a word of friendly advice, son. This diner, it isn't a healthy place. Some places are just spoiled, like milk left out in the sun. Best to move on before you curdle too. His words were a warning, delivered with the weary resignation of a man who had seen too much. He finished his coffee, paid with a crumpled dollar bill, and left. But as he stood up, he accidentally knocked a thin, manila file folder off the counter onto the floor at my feet. "Dan," he muttered, not bothering to pick it up. Getting clumsy in my old age, he walked out without a backward glance. I picked it up. It was a cold case file. Missing persons, hiker group, 10 years ago. Inside were grainy photos of 4 smiling college kids, last seen on a trail that passed within a mile of the diner. The report detailed the fruitless search, the lack of any evidence. Tucked in the back was a smaller, separate report from a young Deputy Griggs, detailing his own partner's disappearance 20 years prior. After responding to a silent 911 call that had been traced to the diner's disconnected phone line, my hands were shaking as I put the file down. This place didn't just spoil people, it consumed them. My eyes fell on the shoebox I'd found, on the small tarnished locket. Driven by a new suspicion, I used the tip of a knife to pry open the back of the jukebox. It hadn't been built that way. The mechanism was a nest of modern wiring, soldered crudely onto the old analog parts. Tucked deep inside, taped to the motor, was a small silver locket. It was identical to the one in the shoebox. I pried it open. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of a different young woman, her face frozen in a silent scream. The name engraved on the back was Ricky, the name of the man who worked here before me. The second locket was a revelation. This wasn't just a string of tragedies. It was a pattern, a ritual. Maeve was at the center of it, a spider in a web of feigned helplessness. That night, I confronted her, laying the open lockets and the stack of photos on the counter between us. "Who are they, Maeve?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "All your old co-workers." For a moment, her mask of weary sorrow slipped, revealing a flash of cold, hard panic. Then, she recovered, tears welling in her eyes. It was a masterful performance. "Lorelei," she whispered, pointing to the photo in the first locket. "That was my sister. She disappeared from here, years ago. I'm working here, trying to find out what happened. The others, they were just people who came and went. People who couldn't handle the strangeness of this place. It was a good lie, a practiced lie. It was designed to disarm me, to forge a bond over shared loss, to make me an ally instead of an accuser. Part of me, the part that still ached for Sarah, wanted to believe her. But the cold, hard evidence of the lockets told a different story. Driven by the information in Griggs's file, I spent the afternoon exploring the woods behind the diner. Just as the old maps in the file had indicated, I found it. A set of old, overgrown railroad tracks leading to a massive, collapsed trestle bridge spanning a deep, rocky gorge. The local Pope Lick Bridge, a place steeped in dark legends. The air here felt different, heavy with a sense of immense, ancient power. The smell of sulfur and ozone was faint but undeniable. When I returned to the diner, Nora Bell, the ghostly waitress, was there, shimmering by the jukebox. She was more solid than I'd ever seen her, her sorrow a palpable force in the room. She didn't look at me, but she raised a trembling, translucent hand and pointed to a specific song selection, D12. I looked at the song list. Delph, The Wreck of the Old 97, a classic ballad about a real-life, fatal train crash. A story of speed, greed, and broken promises. It was another warning. That night, the diner was quiet. Too quiet? No haints, no whispers, just a heavy, expectant silence. Around midnight, the old service bell above the kitchen door, a bell I'd never heard ring, chimed once. A clear, sharp sound that cut through the silence. Me froze, her face draining of all color. The air grew thick, heavy, charged with static electricity. The lights flickered, and the smell of hot iron and sulfur flooded the room, overpowering the scent of old coffee. The front door of the diner, which had been locked, swung open with a slow, deliberate groan. Maeve let out a small, whimpering sound and backed away, pressing herself against the far wall. A figure stooped to enter. It was a towering horror, a thing of nightmare and folklore made flesh. It had the powerful, hirsute legs and cloven hooves of a goat, but the torso and arms of a powerfully built man, covered in thick, matted black fur. Its face was a terrifying hybrid, its intelligent, slitted goat eyes burning with an ancient, pitiless light above a cruel, human-like mouth. The Pope-Lick monster. It shambled into the center of the diner, its hooves clicking sharply on the cracked linoleum floor. It completely ignored Maeve, who was trembling like a leaf in the wind. Its ancient, mesmerizing gaze fell upon me, and a voice, a deep, hypnotic baritone that seemed to bypass my ears and vibrate directly in my bones, filled the room. "The chain is broken and reforged," it spoke. Its voice the sound of shifting rock and broken promises. "The debt is due. The final link, the one who has cheated death, is found." It took another step, its presence warping the very air around it. "How?" it asked, its gaze boring into my soul. "Will you choose to pay?" The creature's voice was a physical force, a deep, resonant hum that settled in my marrow and vibrated through the floorboards. It was a voice that promised ancient contracts and inescapable consequences. The air in the diner grew thick and cold, heavy with the weight of its question. My past, the one I had run so far and so hard to escape. The botched robbery, the flash of the gunshot, the yawning black chasm I had fallen into for a few precious seconds before being dragged back by the frantic hands of paramedics, was no longer a secret. This thing knew. The one who cheated death. It had been waiting for me. Maeve, pressed against the far wall, was a statue of pure terror. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the goat man, her breath coming in shallow, hitching gasps. All her practiced calm, all her weary knowledge, had been stripped away, leaving only the raw, primal fear of a mouse cornered by a serpent. The Pope-lick monster took another slow, deliberate step, its hooves making sharp, distinct clicks on the cheap linoleum. The sound was unnervingly clean, a counterpoint to the being's ragged, bestial form. Its eyes, the color of old, tarnished gold with horizontal, slitted pupils, never left my face. They held a terrifying intelligence, a knowledge of ages that made my own 30-odd years feel as brief and insignificant as the flicker of a match. The pact was struck in fire and sealed with iron. The monster's baritone voice rumbled, seeming to emanate from the very structure of the diner. 3 barons of the railroad sought wealth from the mountain's heart. They promised me dominion over this track, this crossing, and a soul from each of their lines should their fortunes turn. They grew rich, and then they sought to cheat me. They tore up the track, collapsed the trestle, and tried to erase the debt with silence. It gestured with a powerful furred hand, its long, sharp fingernails like yellowed ivory. But the mountain remembers, and I'm a patient collector. It was a history lesson delivered by a nightmare. The wreck of the old 97. The song Nora Bell had pointed to. A broken promise. It was all connected. Their fates became the new terms of the debt. The creature continued, its voice hypnotic, drawing me in. One was found hanging from the rafters of his own mansion, his greed having strangled him. The second died in a hotel fire, a lit cigar dropped in a drunken stupor. The third, in a fit of paranoia, wandered onto another track and was obliterated by the Midnight Express. Its gaze hardened, the golden eyes seeming to pulse with a faint internal light. Hanging, burning. The train. The choice falls to you, Ellis Crane, the final link in their chain of broken faith. Your soul will close the account. Choose one, and your suffering will be manageable. Choose poorly, and your essence will be the grease that oils this diner's wheels for a millennium. My mind raced. Rule number 3. When the Pope-lick monster enters and demands you choose between hanging, burning, or being torn apart by trains, you must choose all 3 simultaneously. It was an insane, paradoxical riddle. A koan from hell. How could anyone choose 3 deaths at once? Ellis. Maeve's voice was a choked whisper from across the room. She had found her voice, or a sliver of it. The legends, the old stories my grandma used to tell, It's a trick question. A riddle. You have to find the loophole. Just pick one. The easiest one. Maybe it will be satisfied. Her words were frantic, desperate. She sounded like she was trying to help me, to save me, but a cold shard of suspicion, born from the lockets and the photos and Caleb's last recorded words, pierced through my fear. Her advice felt wrong, too simple, too easy. The Haint's silent accusation echoed in my memory. Liar. I ignored her, my eyes locked with the monsters, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the creature's resonant hum. I thought of the three fates, a rope, a fire, a train. Separate, they were just deaths. But together, an image formed in my mind, a desperate, insane calculation. It was a gamble on the logic of a demon, a bet against the house in a game I couldn't possibly understand. But it was the only move I had. I took a deep, steadying breath, the air tasting of sulfur and electricity. I choose, I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I thought possible. I choose the burning rope, as it hangs me from the trestle, just as the train comes through to tear me apart. The silence that followed was absolute. The monster's hypnotic hum ceased. For a moment, its golden eyes widened, the pupils contracting to thin black slits. It was not the reaction of a creature whose riddle had been solved. It was the reaction of a master gamesman whose opponent had just made a move it had foreseen, but had hoped would not be played. Then, it threw back its head and released a sound that was not a laugh, but a grating shriek of pure, unadulterated frustration. A sound of grinding metal and splitting rock that made the coffee cups rattle on their shelves. The riddle, it answered. It roared, its voice losing its hypnotic quality and becoming a bellow of raw cosmic fury. The paradox is met. Your soul is shielded from the claim. It took a half step back, its form seeming to flicker for a moment, but then it stilled, a new, colder cunning entering its eyes. But the debt is not paid. The pact requires the soul of the one who last renewed it, or her willing replacement. The bargain stands. It raised a long, clawed finger not at me, but at the trembling figure against the wall. She stands beside you, the keeper of my prison, the one who sacrificed her own to buy her pathetic, fleeting years. Give her to me, Ellis Crane. Give me the liar, and you may walk from this place. Maeve let out a terrified sob. The final mask had been torn away. Her friendly guidance, her shared moments of fear, her story of a lost sister. All of it had been a lie, a carefully constructed stage play to lead me to this exact moment. She wasn't my fellow prisoner. She was the warden, and she had just tried to trick me into taking her place on the gallows. He lies, she screamed, her voice shrill with panic. He's the monster. I was just trying to survive. I had no choice. There is always a choice, Maeve, I said, my voice cold as the grave, enraged that its gambit had failed, that I had not been tricked into offering myself up. The monster's fury turned outward. If I cannot have a willing soul, then I will take this place apart, stone by stone, until only dust and despair remain. It stomped a cloven hoof, and the floorboards buckled. The lights exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the diner into a terrifying gloom lit only by the flickering neon sign outside and the hellish golden glow of the creature's eyes. A wave of kinetic energy blasted from its body. The jukebox flew across the room and shattered against a wall. The grill erupted in a sheet of grease-fueled flame. The minor Haints, the sad, silent specters of the counter, shrieked and dissolved into wisps of terrified static. This was no longer a negotiation. It was a violent, chaotic tantrum. Maeve screamed and scrambled towards the back room. The Pope-like monster, a being of immense, raw power, now untethered by its own riddle, began to systematically destroy the diner, its prison around us. I grabbed the rock-salt shotgun from behind the counter, its wooden stock a solid, reassuring weight in the swirling chaos. The time for riddles was over. The diner became a whirlwind of supernatural violence. The monster, in its unbound fury, was a force of nature. With a sweep of its powerful arm, it sent the heavy steel counter flying, a screech of tortured metal echoing through the room. Booths were splintered. Chairs turned to kindling. The air grew thick with the smell of burning vinyl and the sharp electric tang of raw power. I ducked behind the remains of the counter, the rock-salt shotgun feeling pitifully inadequate against such primal rage. Maeve had scrambled into the kitchen. I could hear her panicked sobs over the roar of the flames and the creature's guttural bellows. It wasn't just destroying the diner. It was trying to tear down the very walls of its prison, to unmake the space that held it. I knew I couldn't fight it head-on. That would be suicide. But Maeve, she was the key. She was the current nexus of the pact, the reason the monster was still tethered here. I needed her. Maeve, I yelled, my voice raw from the smoke. Talk to me! How do you stop it? You've been here for years. You must know something. A loud crash from the kitchen was my only answer. I risked a peek over the counter. The monster was stalking back and forth in the center of the room, its golden eyes scanning the wreckage, searching for us. It was a predator pacing its cage, and the cage was rapidly falling apart. Suddenly, the wail of a distant siren cut through the chaos. It was faint, but growing closer. Sheriff Griggs. He must have seen the flames from the main road, or heard the impossible sounds echoing through the valley. A flicker of hope, hot and sharp, pierced through my terror. The monster heard it too. It stopped its rampage and turned its head towards the sound, a low, angry growl rumbling in its chest. The siren was an intrusion from the world outside, a world it couldn't touch but deeply resented. This was my chance. I scrambled over the debris and into the kitchen. It was a wreck of dented stainless steel and scattered utensils. Maeve was huddled in the corner, beneath a prep table, weeping, her face streaked with soot and tears. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide with the terror of a cornered animal. "Get away from me!" she shrieked. "You did this! You were supposed to choose. You were supposed to take my place. Your place." I grabbed her by the arm, hauling her to her feet. She was surprisingly light, her body trembling uncontrollably. "Your place was earned with the lives of Ricky and Lorelei and God knows how many others. Your time is up. Now you're going to tell me how to end this." My rough handling seemed to break through her hysteria. Her face crumpled, the years of feigned confidence and cold survivalism dissolving into a portrait of pure, pathetic misery. "You can't," she sobbed, her words tumbling out in a rush. "You don't understand. It's the pact. It's bound to this place, to the clock." "The clock?" I asked, glancing around. "The old railroad clock," she said, pointing a shaking finger towards the main dining room, towards the wall behind the counter. "The big one. It's not just a clock. It was a gift to the station from one of the barons, the one who died by the train. It's the anchor, the heart of the pact. He's tied to it. As long as it's here, he's here." The wail of Grig's siren was much closer now, joined by the crunch of tires on the gravel outside. The monster roared in fury at the intrusion and smashed a fist through one of the remaining plate glass windows, the sound of shattering glass like a gunshot. "So we destroy the clock," I said, a desperate plan forming. "No! No!" Maeve's scream was sharp, cutting through the din. She grabbed my shirt, her eyes wild with a new, even deeper terror. "If you destroy the clock, you don't kill him. You free him. The pact is broken. The anchor is gone. I'd be free from this place. Free to walk the world. To take his collection on the road. You can't. It will be 1,000 times worse." The back door burst open. Sheriff Griggs stood there, his face illuminated by the flashing lights of his patrol car, his police-issue revolver looking like a child's toy in the face of the chaos within. He took in the scene, the flames, the wreckage, the towering, demonic form of the Pope-like monster roaring in the center of the room, and his face went pale, aged 20 years in an instant. "My God," he breathed, the memory of his own long-ago encounter crashing down on him. It's still here. The monster turned its full attention to the new arrival, its ancient enemy. This was it. The final, terrible calculus. Let the diner be destroyed, trapping us all with it. Destroy the clock and unleash this thing upon the world. Or there had to be another way. The monster, seeing Griggs as the more immediate threat, took a shambling step towards the sheriff. Griggs stood his ground, firing 2 quick shots from his revolver. The bullets flattened against the creature's furry hide, having no more effect than throwing pebbles. "It's the pact, Sheriff," I yelled over the roar. "It's bound to the clock, but we can't destroy it." My mind was racing, connecting the disparate pieces. The shotgun shells, the haints, the rules, Maeve's confession. Rock salt doesn't kill haints. It dissolves them, reminds them they're supposed to be gone. It was a purifying agent, not a weapon of destruction, but of cleansing. A new insane gamble formed in my mind. The final choice. "Maeve," I said, my voice low and urgent. "The pact. It needs a soul who cheated death, right? To close the account?" She nodded numbly, her eyes wide. "Yes, that's why it needed you, and it was made by men who broke their promise." I continued, thinking aloud. "It's a debt of betrayal." I looked at the monster now advancing on the backpedaling sheriff. I looked at the terrified, weeping form of Maeve, who had betrayed her own friends to survive. And I looked inward at the festering guilt over the bystander, the innocent man who had died because of my own crime, my own broken promise to society, to myself, my own cheated death. I knew what I had to do. It was the only atonement that mattered. "Griggs! Distract it. Keep its attention," I yelled. Then I turned to Maeve. "I'm sorry for what this place made you become," I said. It was the truest thing I'd said all night. Before she could react, I ran. Not away, but directly towards the main counter, towards the large, ornate railroad clock on the wall. The monster, hearing my movement, turned its terrible head, its golden eyes locking on me. It roared, realizing I was going for its anchor. It was too late. I wasn't trying to smash the clock. I raised the rock salt shotgun, took aim at the clock's glass face, and pulled the trigger. The blast was deafening in the confined space. The heavy payload of rock salt didn't shatter the clock. It passed through the glass like it wasn't there, and struck the intricate brass gears within. There was no explosion. Instead, a wave of brilliant, pure white light erupted from the clock face. A light that was clean and cold, not hot and angry. The pact, the anchor of the curse, wasn't being destroyed. It was being cleansed. The salt, a tool against minor spirits, was acting on the metaphysical rust of a century-old promise, scouring away the betrayal, nullifying the debt. The Pope-like monster stopped dead. It threw back its head and released a long, agonized shriek that was not of rage, but of dissolution. Its claim, its very reason for being tethered to this spot, had been voided. The ancient contract was fulfilled not by a soul, but by an act of purification. Its form began to unravel. The fur, the muscle, the ancient, intelligent eyes. It all dissolved into a swirling cloud of black dust and dying embers, pulled violently back into the clock on the wall. The clock face, now clear of its glass, cracked down the middle, a deep fissure forming in its wooden frame. The hands, which had been frozen at midnight, spun wildly before stopping for good. The fire, no longer fueled by supernatural rage, died down to a manageable blaze. The oppressive atmosphere vanished, replaced by the mundane smell of smoke and burnt vinyl. The mountain spirits were gone. The haints were gone. Nora Bell was gone. Nora Bell was gone. The diner was just a diner again. A ruined, burning, empty diner. In the sudden, ringing silence, Maeve, Sheriff Griggs, and I just stood there, breathing. They let Maeve go. As Griggs said later, "What am I gonna charge her with? Consorting with a demonic entity? There ain't a judge in this state who'd sign that warrant." She left town that morning. A ghost in the daylight, freed from her pact, but forever haunted by the price she'd paid. The diner burned to its foundation. The official report called it faulty wiring. I didn't stick around. I walked away from the smoking ruins, the weight of my own past finally, truly feeling lighter. I hadn't just survived. I'd faced my own debt, my own cheated death, and on my own terms, I'd had paid it. Months later, I'm working at a quiet garage in a town hundreds of miles away. Life is simple. It's quiet. But last night, a man came in with a broken down car. An old-timer with kind, weary eyes. As I was fixing his engine, he told me stories. He was from Kentucky, he said, near a place called Lick Creek. He talked about the local legends, about a creature, a goat man that was said to haunt the old railroad trestle. Funny thing though, the old man said, wiping his hands on a rag, the stories have changed just in the last few months. They used to say the creature was a monster, that it lured people to their deaths. He paused, a strange, thoughtful look on his face. But now, the young folks who go out there looking for a scare, they say it's different. They say if you're respectful, if your heart is heavy with regret, it doesn't harm you. They say it just listens. And sometimes it offers a choice, not of death, but of atonement. He looked at me, his eyes holding a knowledge that was ancient and deep, almost as if he said softly, someone taught it a new way. He paid for the repair and left. I stood there, under the buzz of the fluorescent lights, the smell of grease and gasoline in the air, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The clock was broken, but maybe, just maybe, I had reset the curse. The Mourning Diner. It demands a price for passage, and its currency is regret. Ellis Crane learned that some debts run deeper than money. The rules were meant to trap the horrors, but sometimes they just reveal a darker truth. The diner may be gone, but the mountain remembers. Seriously, if you didn't stay until the very end, you missed the ultimate choice, the twist that reshaped the very nature of the curse. The final moments change everything. What do you think of Maeve's ultimate fate? What was the Lick monster truly after? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you made it through the night at the Mourning Diner, if the haints haven't claimed you, then you're already a part of our story. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules, because some pit stops, they come with a life sentence, and the last call is always waiting.